This is Hank from the Wildflower Bee Farm for July 8th, 2021. Well, I went in and looked, and this actual hive had a queen failure. So my job was to go in and look and see if I could understand it better and to take off some of the honey that the bees had left. You can see a spider just sitting here. Now here I'm taking off the moisture blanket, and the bees propolised it so much so that it just tore off the container. Now those are robber bees. Those are not bees that live there. There are bees that came in to start sort of robbing. There's a sensor. I took the temperature sensor away. So now I have to sort of tear that off and clean it all up. Now there's some hop guard from the spring. I think I told you it's from hops, the hops plant, and I'll probably never use it again. It's very difficult and tough. Turned out to be very tough on queens, and I'm not sure if that's why we had queen failure or if that strictly had to do with something else. And as I've talked about before, queens used to live 5 to 7 years. Now they live 6 months to a year max, according to the experts. So I'm trying to get some of the robbers out of there. Now, robbers traditionally won't sting or do anything like that, but they can get nasty because they're fighting to get some material, or in this case, some wax or honey. So I'm going to start by taking it out and just show you what it looks like. Now this hive left, and they pretty much left the entire top box. You can see that's all capped honey. It's all capped honey. And by getting in as I did, we're going to try to get the honey off, because if we don't, things will happen. Mainly, what will happen is robbers will come in, decap it, and when you get too many robbers coming after this much honey this close to other hives, it's usually not a good thing. Plus, the honey was all created this spring. This queen failure happened later in the spring, and we know that from the indentations made by the hop guard. So where you saw me pulling those hop guard strips off, and again, since this, we've decided to go treatment-free on the majority of our hives. We'll talk about that in future podcasts or videos. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually put down some of the essential oil mixture that sort of repels bees. If you remember, it smells a little bit like almonds. And when you put it down, now you can see a bit of smoke on the right there. I still have some smoke going. When you repel bees with this, it's a good way to get bees, just to make sure that they stay away. Now there I have this sort of material that I use, and I've put some of the natural oils on there, the essential oils, the mixture, and it comes in a prepared sort of potion. It smells just like sort of almonds, so it doesn't smell bad or anything to me, but apparently to the bees it's just not something. I can see the ants on there. There were some ants on the last hive. Now I put the lid back on so that material then sort of forms a little bit of a vapor area and pushes the bees down. Now it also does not, the good news is it also doesn't get connected at all with the honey. So even though it smells strong like almonds, it will not get in to the honey. So while we do not raise bees or have bees on the farm for honey, we're a family, and when we see something like this, obviously providing some of that honey to our family and friends is a good idea. And also in this case, there is so much pollen and nectar out there that the bees generally don't need it to survive, or we don't need to feed it back to any hives, because we traditionally don't do that as well, letting the bees sort of take control of their own situation. So in this top box, there can be anywhere from 40 to 60 pounds of honey. That's a lot of honey that they would have left behind. There was also honey later I discovered in the lower box. So in the brood area where they kept babies, there also were some sections of honey where they had it to easily feed, and also mix with pollen to create a different feed for the bees. The essential oils that you're seeing that I used here really have made a difference and made it easier on the bees, because when you have to use smoke and you have to use a lot of sort of sweeping motions to get the bees off of the frames if they're still working on the honey, it actually can be more difficult for the bees than using this kind of material. One of the things also that's important to think about is the queen failure idea. When you look at the the smaller lifespan of the queens compared to what it used to be. We really don't know why that is the case. Why is it that queens do not live as long as they used to? Some of the experts talk about the environment. Some of them talk about sprays in our environment. Some talk about the genetic rearing of bees. Many of our hives are beyond 2-3 years, and so if that's true, then obviously there need to have been other queens that were sort of brought on to replace those that passed by the hives. And they do that by simply taking some of the eggs. If a queen doesn't make it, or they have to supersede, which is produce a new queen if that queen becomes sick that's there, they take some of the eggs, and instead of feeding them to traditional material, they will feed them royal jelly to make the larvae into a queen. Now here I am just taking off the material. One of the problems with this material, it does have some of the fibers. Now it didn't get into the honey or anything, and we use a very simple crush and strain method. So that means when you take the honey, you basically scrape it off into a clean stainless steel sort of screen, let it drip through. It takes about a day for all of the honey to drip off the wax. And then you strain it and simply bottle it, and the wax make into candles and other products. You can see all of the capped honey that the bees simply had. Now what happens when the queen doesn't make it, gradually the population of the hive gradually diminishes. And because our policy is not to go in and look at the hives on a regular basis, we only notice it by seeing a reduction in the bee population. They didn't just suddenly abscond. They didn't just leave or abandon the hive. They simply gradually reduced their population because the queen was no longer there. So this is my final clean out of the top box, where I take out the honey, and we then use that honey. And I have to tell you, it was early spring honey, so it had a combination of wildflowers, a little bit of clover, and other flowers that were blooming, including some of the trees that we have that bloom in the early season. So I'm Hank from the Wildflower Bee Farm. You can see the indentation there from the hop guard, where there is no honey, right there especially. That was from the hop guard. But it turned out to be quite fantastic, and we used the bottom box to hopefully catch another swarm. So I'm Hank for the Wildflower Bee Farm. I'll talk to you again next week.